It's the first instalment of the Illuminating Rounds 2025 VASL tournament. I drew Tuomo Lakari and am meeting and playing him for the first time, virtually of course. In the initial round, we are all playing a pre-release scenario by none other than Pete Schelling for the Slaughter of Ponri Hassel. Even though I have the module, it's my first playing of anything from this recent product. The scenario is deceptive, and at first it looks fairly vanilla, but the inclusion of the trenches really gives this one its flavour. The Russian defender needs to know SaP 6 along with B27.5 trenches and its parent rule B27.1 foxholes, as well as B30.8 bunkers to make the most of his resources. Stealthy elite Russians, SaP 16, and hand-to-hand declaration by both sides, SaP 3, adds further spice. Another key one is Russian elite ammunition depletion, SaP 17, which makes the included inf gun a bigger headache for the Germans. Tuomo kindly let me decide which side to take, and not knowing anything about this scenario or SaP Hassel at all, I chose the simpler option to defend and considered my setup. It's clear the Germans have a real task to overcome the Russians, and the victory conditions are an interesting balance of both sides battling for control of the village buildings and exiting the German infantry off the west edge. I was uncertain as to how best to prioritise these different elements, but settled for defending the buildings in strength, as I felt the Germans would need to also focus their efforts on this and not rely on being able to sprint off the board. To do so, I set up the inf gun to dominate the road and village. I felt the lack of concealment terrain here would not be an issue, as the position was more important than keeping hidden. I plan to have crossing fire lanes in the north while putting my 527s in the middle to be up close and personal. My southernmost sector was lightly defended but looked bigger with dummy stacks. I was worried about a sweep south by the Germans, but hoped that my planned mid-game reposition and north-south fire lanes protected by the inf gun and troops in the middle sector would be hard to overcome. The random positioning of the wrecks was not ideal, but also not terrible. Finally, the trenches were a key part of the setup and were placed to support the mid-game reposition, ease of movement from flank to flank, and enable a bit of cat and mouse on line of sight in the southern sector. With B30.8 in play for buildings, the trenches are a very helpful fortification. Game turn 1. Tuomo's Germans entered much as I anticipated. However, my fire lanes failed in the north, with both the MMG and LMG breaking on the initial shot. I felt in immediate danger, but was able to eliminate a half squad as first blood. In the centre and south, I was conservative, with a little fire and one German MMC breaking in the orchards. German advancing fire was ineffective, being a theme during much of this game, and Tuomo advanced his units to close. But having kept 1527 concealed in F52, no Germans advanced there. Russian turn 1. In my first player turn, I had limited but unsuccessful prep fire, and otherwise withdrew in the north and the centre and repositioned in the south. The one exception was assault moving a concealed 7-0 leader into F52 with the aim of a shot at an ambush later in the turn. The German defensive fire phase was ineffective, barring a break in F50 and encirclement of the stack in F52. A great play by Tuomo, which gave pause for thought for any advance and close combat as it would cause my units to become CX. In the end, I went for it and succeeded in the ambush and hand-to-hand close combat against the German squad in E50. Side benefits were the elimination of the MMG, control of the building, and infiltration back to a safer location. German turn 2, the broken Russian MMG repaired, and the German tanks laid down smoke, covering the German move into the village in the north. This attack started badly though, with a very rare PTC leading to a booby trap and elimination of the half squad headed for I-50. The attack inched forward elsewhere. The Russian line repelled some of the attackers, with ineffective advancing fire. Tuomo held his squads back from close combat, mindful of not losing more troops, but establishing some solid fire groups in the process. In my turn 2, I was now faced with decisions about whether to continue my aggressive defence or completely withdraw to the planned mid-game position. To kick off the prep fire, the INF gun fired and broke the 467 in H50. The squad in crest status in H55 fired and broke up the fire group threatening it. Elsewhere I withdrew, using the trench line for safety where possible. Tuomo's defensive fire began with laying dispersed smoke to avoid interdiction for the squad in H50, a classy move. Elsewhere, firing options were slim, with the main opportunity against H55 failing to have an effect. In the advancing fire phase, the unit in G55 was pinned, now a juicy close combat target. I then advanced my units either into CC or into the mid-game positions, with the repaired MMG and the other LMG now in the planned locations for fire lanes. These close combats both went my way, with a hand-to-hand declared in the south, as the 467 was pinned, and a normal combat in the north, eliminating the 467 and casually reducing the 447. That was a tough turn for the Germans, and Tuomo's player morale was being tested, his task becoming harder with each unit eliminated. However, he regathered himself and prepared for a final effort. Game turn 3. Tuomo's sole prep fire into G55 ELR'd and broke the 447 there. The movement phase began with the Mark III overrunning the 237 in the trench in the north with another ELR'd Rusky. After some half squad running around in the south, the next tank rumbled into the village in the centre, bounding firing and again ELR'ing a squad in H52. Things were definitely looking better for the Germans with this push. To add to the swing in momentum, a German hero was created in H51. German advancing fire went without event, and the Russian Brokies routed where they could, the trenches being treated as buildings for this purpose. The Germans advanced along the front, knowing that time was now also against them in the race to the eastboard edge. Russian turn 3. I again had the option to retire, but felt now was the time to deal with a telling blow to the attackers. Things started with the ATR missing the deliberate immobilisation against the tank, but quickly improved with the INF gun breaking the 467 in the street. A follow-up rate of fire shot missed the half squad in the Borsite location. The 527 formed a fire group to break the adjacent squad in H52. The leader's morale check yielded a sniper, which wounded the leader trying to rally the units in the north and DM the Brokies there. Things were suddenly looking grim for Tuomo. A further prep fire yielded another morale check and sniper, and this time killed the leader up north outright. That was 3 sniper checks for Russians in this game for 3 results. An opportunity now came to surround the broken Germans from the 8-0 in J52, declaring CX. It ran some low-end defensive first fire and made it unscathed into G52. Tuomo called it at that point, 2 broken units were likely now unable to rout, and he just did not have enough even to scrape a win. Post-game thoughts. Try as he may, Tuomo could not make his attack land any telling punches, while the Russians seemed to have success with most of what they tried. The dice certainly played their part here, but while my average dice was only 6.94, it's all about when you get your luck. I suspect Tuomo's average was materially higher. Notwithstanding this, I was happy with my setup, my overall plan, and how I executed. A mix of fighting withdrawal and targeted aggression. I will be interested to see how the other games go, and suspect the results will go in favour of the Russians. There really is more to this scenario than meets the eye, and it has whet my appetite for the published SaP module itself, though thanks to Pete Schelling for that. Finally, thanks to Tuomo for being a great opponent in the face of adversity, and, as always, to Dave and Martin for running the tournament and their ongoing support of the hobby.